Hi, here we go again. Colorado Soul Stories. Been all over the place. If you're listening in order, you would have listened to my discussion with my lovely friend Andy Mast of Westcliff, Colorado. Andy is a wonderful artist and just all around good guy. My interview with him is very different than what you're going to hear next. And the only connection is that they are both based in Westcliff, Colorado. Here is my friend Jojo Elmquist again telling one of her crazy adventure stories. Enjoy. Okay, we're having a bit of a chuckle remembering I was not there, but I know the story, this next story that JoJo's going to tell. What's the name of it?
Me and the sheriff.
You and the sheriff. Do you want to give any more intro or do you want to just read?
I'll read it and then you can ask me anything after.
Okay. Sounds good. Go ahead.
All right. Westcliff in the late 1980s was more of a spot on a map than a vibrant Colorado mountain town. Nestled up against the Sangre de Cristo mountain range, it was a hamlet few people knew about. Therefore, it was especially strange to be working there, commuting from Denver on the weekends. I was a newly licensed real estate agent and wasn't having much luck selling houses in Denver, so I figured selling Colorado mountain property more closely aligned with my then current life experiences. Especially since as a kid, I went to summer camp just up the road at Rainbow Trail. The locals were not happy that the big city greedy real estate people were in town to sell off their land, even if technically we were hired by the current owners to sell it. Change is hard and the locals were not going to accept that quietly. Saturday and Sunday days were spent guiding prospective buyers around parcels of land subdivided into home sites. Saturday night consisted of going to one of the 3 restaurants in town for dinner and then either headed to one of the 2 bars in town or going back to the loneliness of the motel room shared with one of your coworkers. After dinner, Jim, one of the more experienced salespeople on the team, asked who wanted to go to the Silver Dome. The Silver Dome, aptly named, was a geodesic dome-shaped bar. As one of the younger people on the sales team, I jumped on the opportunity since watching TV from my motel room bed seemed too boring for the night. I jumped in his Subaru wagon and off we went. He immediately spied a group of young ladies at the pool table and went to introduce himself, buy rounds of drinks, and try to get lucky. I didn't have a lot of hope for him since he was at least 25 years older than the ladies, but good for him for trying. I sat at the bar and ordered a Coors Light, one of the few beers on tap. Off to my right were a couple of cowboys in faded, dirty Wrangler jeans, boots, and hats. To my left, a combination of working men, some in cowboy boots, some in work boots, all in dirty jeans. The bartender brought me a beer and a shot of Jim Beam. I said, I didn't order that. The bartender says, it's from the guys over there, pointing to the guys on my right. I lifted the shot in a silent salute to my benefactors, brought it to my lips, gulped it down, and said thanks. That was their signal to move closer. I needed the company since I knew Jim would be otherwise occupied for the duration. Kyle and John introduced themselves, and I did the same. We talked, drank, laughed, and drank more. A typical Saturday night in any small-town bar. It was getting late, though, and both Jim and I had to work early, so we called it a night and made our way back to the motel. We said our good nights, and I thought it was the end of the night. A short while later, I heard tires screeching to a halt in the parking lot outside my door, then banging on room doors. I peered out the window and saw the 2 cowboys from the bar. I opened the door and asked, what are you doing here? The driver of the F-150 truck, Kyle, motioned for me to come outside. You need to get out of town. The sheriff is looking for you, he said. What? Why? I asked. He explained, after you left the dome, the other guys at the bar started a fight with us. I wasn't even there. What does the sheriff want with me? Well, the fight was because of you. The other guys didn't like the way we monopolized your time. I guess they wanted to chat with you. And then a few shots were exchanged at the bar. I guess if we had gone outside, this would have just blown over. What? Is this a joke? There was a gunfight at the bar after I left and the sheriff thinks it's my fault? That's just how he is. He doesn't like foreigners like you in town. He will calm down after a few hours. You better come with us. By then, my motel roommate was getting angry about getting woken up by the ruckus and told me to get out of there since she didn't want any trouble with the sheriff. I wasn't sure why she would be in trouble, but stupidly I went. I got in the truck in between Kyle and John and we took off out of town towards the forest. I looked down into the footwell beneath John and saw a cooler of beer, which was expected, and about 20 guns of all shapes and sizes. Not what I expected. I tried to act like it was totally normal to be driving fast in a pickup truck, heading out of town and into the forest with a couple of guys I met at a bar who had enough guns to arm the local cavalry. The only thing missing was a sheriff following closely behind with sirens blaring and lights flashing. We drove up the rutted-out dirt road, and it was obvious they had a destination in mind. We pulled up to a clearing with a fire pit, old logs around the pit, and parked. There were multiple signs that this was a frequented area, including broken bottles and smashed beer cans that littered the ground. They put the tailgate down and put the cooler and guns in the bed of the truck. "We can have a few beers and then do a little target practice," said John. While my knowledge of guns was limited, I figured that I should be armed just in case something bad happened. A small stature woman out in the forest with two relatively unknown, heavily armed men seemed like the scene from a horror movie. I slipped a small snub-nosed revolver down the back waistband of my jeans. Drinking and shooting guns goes together like America and apple pie. I didn't understand it until then, but if you were drinking, you had a replenishable supply of targets to shoot at. Makes sense, right? I had fired rifles and shotguns, but never handguns or anything close to an automatic or semi-automatic weapon. The recoil from some of those guns made my arm sore. Beer, shoot, put up more targets, beer, reload. You get the picture. As light began to trickle through the trees and the sun was just peeking up above the mountain range, we headed back to the motel. They dropped me off, and each of them gave me a hug and said they'd be at the bar next week when I came back to town. I needed a shower, clean clothes, and some breakfast before heading to work. My motel roommate, Maureen, questioned me about my whereabouts from the night. I told her I'd explain it at breakfast. I walked across the carpet in my muddy boots, not paying much attention. I might have still been drunk. We packed up and headed to the restaurant. While I sat back drinking my black coffee and waiting for breakfast to arrive, an unwelcome guest entered the restaurant and made a beeline to our table. It was the sheriff and his posse of deputies. "It's time for you to leave," he said in a voice loud enough to be heard by the entire restaurant. "Me? What did I do?" I asked demurely. "The shootout at the Dome, defacing public land, shooting guns all night, and now trashing a motel room," he explained. I protested against the allegations and pleaded my innocence. "Now, or I'm taking you to jail." "But I haven't even gotten my breakfast." "Pay your tab, get in your Jeep, and we'll escort you to the county line." What? I was being escorted out of the county by the sheriff and 2 additional cars of deputies? This was the 1980s, not the 1880s, but it certainly seemed more like the 1880s. I could see he wasn't joking. I did as I was told and got into my car. One of the deputies told me to follow his patrol car. Then the sheriff got into his patrol truck and pulled right behind my Jeep. We stayed in tight formation all the way to the county line. As we approached the county line, the lead car pulled to the side of the road and the sheriff behind me turned on his lights and siren. I pulled over behind the patrol car and the sheriff pulled right next to me, rolled down his window, and told me, "Don't come back to my county or I'll have you in lockup faster than a jackrabbit fleeing a prairie fire." I left the county, and that was the last time I went back for over 20 years.
Oh my God, the Wild West. Colorado Soul Stories. That's what you're getting here. All kinds of stories that emanate from Colorado from all different time periods. It was such a different place back then. However, I go to Westcliff frequently, and it's still a very tiny town. And
Yep.
I heard, didn't we hear that sheriff recently passed away?
Yes, we did. I was at a party and someone mentioned that they were living in Westcliff, and I told them this story, and he goes, "I think I know who that sheriff was, and he recently passed away, and he did rule that county with just an iron fist." So I feel safe to go back now. For many years, I envisioned that there would be wanted posters of me up in the local post office. But then I remembered I hadn't been charged with a crime, only accused of one. Right. So I figured there weren't any official wanted posters.
Man. And the attitude about guns was a little different. We didn't have mass shootings yet or anything. It was just a kind of a casual Western thing, or American thing, I suppose. It's gotten a little out of hand now, but back then it was pretty innocent, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it definitely was just part of the way of life of most rural communities.
I love your stories. I knew that one, but I think one time I invited JoJo. Somehow we were going through Westcliff or to Westcliff. Nope, I can't go there. I said, "Why?" The sheriff said I can't come back. I was like, hang on. So I knew a little of the story, but that was great to hear the whole thing. Good stuff.
Yeah, and I think it really tells the story also about that community spirit that was there. Those cowboys didn't want any harm to come to me. They wanted to protect me from the sheriff.
Yeah.
And it's that type of community that really makes you love the parts of the Old West.
Oh yeah. And we still have that in little parts of Colorado.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See you next time.